I just wrapped up about 24 hours of gameplay with Wuthering Waves, and guys, it's a lot. There's a lot in there, and there's a lot that I need to talk about. Some things that are really good and hold up in the way that we thought, and other things that don't hold up as much as I would have hoped they would have. But I want to give my honest thoughts and honest feedback on what's going on in the game right now, because I'm a big fan and a big supporter of Wuthering Waves, but in doing that, you need to be clear about what works, what doesn't, and honest with your opinions on that. So let's dive in and let's take a look at my account. So I have been playing, like I said, for about 24 hours now. That's taking into account I slept for a little bit on stream. We had a bit of a pre-stream situation going on too. So of actual gameplay, it's just shy of 24 hours. Now we did just get some 10 free pull from some technical issues, but I'm gonna have another video following up on that. But I'm gonna go ahead and just claim those really quick. We'll come back to those in a little bit. But I've been playing for about 24 hours, grinding pretty hard, and I have made it to Union level 21. This is about the second kind of account level barrier you're going to hit. The first being needing to hit level 15. And then after you finally hit level 15, there you get the access to the next part of the story. And then there's another big gap until level 21. And so if you're trying to push the content within the first couple days, it is a lot of grinding. It's a lot of gameplay. It's a lot of side quests, and it's a lot of farming just to make sure that you can continue to push that content. Some other people are more efficient than me, have been grinding harder than me, and have made it even higher. But I would say I've been pushing pretty aggressively, and I would still say I'm ahead of the curve on your Union level in the game. And it's been fun. Let me be clear out the gate, I have had a ton of fun playing Wuthering Waves so far. It has really met my expectations of what I had hoped Wuthering Waves was going to be when the game was launching, and when we were kind of waiting and anticipating it. You know, we had this gap between CBT2 and now, and it is exactly where I wanted the game to be in terms of gameplay and the overall experience, but a couple areas fall short. So the first area that's bad, I had abysmal luck. If I go into the convene silver here, I had no early luck on the novice banner that launched, and the first 5-star I managed to get on my account was Verena. And I'm gonna be honest, I know some people are excited about Verena from a meta perspective, but from a personal preference perspective, which I always suggest you should do, I was a little bit disappointed by that. I'm gonna be honest, I've come around a little bit, and I'll get to that in a minute, but I was a little bit disappointed. I got a bunch of weapons on the first pulls too, and I managed to get Alto. But then through some additional pulls on now what is the selection banner, where I'm trying to get Kalkaro currently, and a 10 pull or 2 on the Ji Yan banner, I did manage to get some additional characters and some additional wave bands, and the character happening to be Donjin. Now this was definitely a saving grace after being disappointed by getting Verena and not one of the other characters I had wanted. I managed to get Donjin, which is great. She's one of the characters that I wanted to main and have as a DPS on my account. So this was a blessing for sure that I managed to get her. And she plays just as well, if not better, as she did in the CBT2. She still is cracked, does some absolutely insane damage, and she has been a ton of fun. Let's just take a quick little aside. We did manage to get another 10 free pull really quick. Let's just do a quick pull and see if we can get a little bit of recording luck here. Streamer luck's not a thing, but maybe recording? No recording. Okay, maybe something good comes through here. Maybe we still get a character we don't have. I'm still hoping to expand my roster. Maybe can we get someone good?
Today.
Oh, no way. Guys, I've had such terrible luck. I don't want Alto. I've got a wave band of Alto. Stop giving me Alto. In conclusion, the game sucks. Uninstall the game. No. So I want to break down my experience in a couple different categories. So again, like we all expected, combat has been phenomenal in the game. I love how each character has an opportunity for combos, some more than others in terms of complexity. Like Donjin, for example, has multiple different combinations that you can use with her to increase her damage depending on the situation of the boss that you're fighting. It is great, but you can get the same thing from using Yang Yang, and even Verena has some combos on her side as well, or the Rover also has some combos available. The combat depth in the characters themselves is great, and that's not even taking the team building into consideration. While team building is definitely still different from something like Genshin in terms of the elemental synergies, there is still team building that comes into play in terms of like supports, damage amplification, or crowd control, other things that are going to help your combat in that way. And it's definitely still holding up. It's exactly what I want it to be. From the world perspective, honestly, I think the world is great. So many people have griped about the color scheme and the overall theming of the game. But if you could look at this scene right now, like, let's be real, This is great. I think this is a beautiful scenic view, and this is only one of the areas in the game that you can experience something like this. There's other more whimsical areas or more fantastical areas like giant fungal trees, giant wisteria trees, things of that nature, that honestly, the overall environment in world is beautiful. The music has been on point for the most part. This is one area. We've got a few gripes a little bit here. I think broadly speaking, the open world music is really good. It does a great job at really amplifying your experience and giving me that immersion into the game, exactly what I wanted it to. But I feel like they've changed the tracks on a couple of the bosses. Like one, for example, was the Impermanence Heron. Used to have this more like dubsteppy, like harder track, and I feel like I was hearing a different track going into the boss fight this time around, which was a little bit disappointing overall. But I still gotta say, I have been overall very excited about that. And it's just a brief note in terms of combat. The combat difficulty has been perfect for me. I even going through this leveling process and fighting the world bosses has felt challenging once I ascended my world level. Now, of course, kind of like Genshin, as you level up your union level, the difficulty of the world increases. And now that I've gone into rank 3 of the soul phase, it is actually getting kind of challenging for some of the bosses based on where the levels of my characters are and not having quite all the echoes that I need on my account and needing to level them. The challenge and difficulty that I'm getting from this experience is good. It's making me engaged. It doesn't feel totally monotonous, and I'm feeling progression in it. Like when I was fighting Crownless just recently, again, I feel like I'm really polishing my ability to fight him in combat and getting the parry timings. And man, when you can hit 5-6 parries in a row and you are just absolutely dominating bosses, the satisfaction you get from it is intense. And I have absolutely been loving the combat. It feels appropriately scaled in difficulty, and I'm excited to continue to dive into that further. I haven't had an opportunity to go back into the hologram floors because I'm only union level 21, so I'll have a follow-up there as we get deeper into that end game combat. But we have done a little bit of diving into the Tower of Adversity, and I will say it has been very similar there as well. Do need to revisit that. Now, movement has been good. Moving the world, I've encountered a few minor bugs in the movement, a couple areas where I got kind of stuck in, but usually I've been able to pull myself out with like the grappling hook utility or something else to kind of get myself unstuck. I've not had any hard stuck bugs or issues where like I literally have to like shut off the game or something. Overall, the movement has been good. It hasn't been overly buggy. From an overall performance standpoint, I have not been experiencing a lot of issues. I know some other people have been. I'm going to make another video on that. But overall, I'll say the performance for the game has been pretty up to par. I've had to decrease my overall graphics a little bit. I've got a decently powerful machine, and I found I still had to decrease my overall settings. Maybe a little bit of optimization work is still needed on that side of it. But I've heard other people say on their phones who've been able to play that it doesn't cook their phones. It seems to be working pretty well there. So overall, seems to be a fairly positive experience when you're in the game. Again, I know there's other stuff. We'll talk about that later. Now, I want to talk a little bit about story, the characters, and some of the voice acting in the game. And this is where I think the game starts to fall a little short. Gameplay, exploration, combat, honestly, primo. But the characters, world building, and voice acting needs a little bit of work. So first thing about the voice acting, I think the voice acting overall, at least from the English perspective, which I've been using because I think it's nicer for stream and you guys to engage with that, I think the voice acting has been okay. It's been okay for the most part. Some characters are definitely better than others. Like, for example, I really like Sanwa's English VA. I think she does a great job in the game. However, like Chisha's, I know she's not necessarily everybody's taste. And there's definitely some parts that you can hear that she's British. And I'm not trying to like criticize the voice actress too directly or anything here, but it sounds like they got the voice direction to try and sound kind of like more of like a neutral American accent or North American accent. But when you're bringing in a lot of British voice actors to do that, you definitely still manage to catch some accents sneaking through at times. And for example, Shisha early on says barrier, and you can totally tell it's like a British way of saying barrier. I'm not going to try and do it because I'll just be embarrassing myself. So overall, the voice acting is okay. But as far as English voice acting in the game goes, it still is definitely above average. That's for sure. I just want to make sure that that's abundantly clear. Definitely above average in that case, but definitely not one of its stronger parts. From the world and questing perspective, as of right now, I am currently in the middle of Act 5 of the story. So this is story beyond what we've seen from the closed beta test 2. And I will say there hasn't been any major changes from the story from CBT2. So if you have played that, it's about the same. There's a few new things that were added in concerning the new boss Dreamless, if you've been following any media on that. And I will say those new elements that were added were definitely welcome. It definitely refreshed a little bit of that, especially if you played CBT2, you want something to kind of refresh your experience with that. Definitely it had that. But as I'm getting into it further, I'm still noticing there are some pacing issues.
Wow,
now, it could be the case, and I'm going to be fair here, it could be the case that this is we're suffering from a beginning of the story. So there's a ton of exposition dumps, a ton of lore dumps and world building dumps that like really start to wear you down, where you're like, okay, like let's move on. We've been talking about this for like 5 minutes straight of just straight yapping. Show me something more. Show me more of the story. Don't just tell me all the story. Don't talk the whole story out. And those moments definitely do still happen. There's still a moment earlier on in the research facility that comes to mind, but then there's some other parts as well in the city hall that come up that it's just straight yapping. And of course, while it's more mysterious, the moment with Scar's story, not going to have any more spoilers than that, while it's definitely interesting, it still is long. But as far as like complexity though, I still think it adds more mystery than other parts of the story have. I'm still interested enough to see where the story goes, but it's definitely not a driving factor compared to the overall combat experience. So overall, as somebody who's been grinding pretty aggressively within the first 24 hours of the game, I gotta say, it is still doing an excellent job from the gameplay experience itself. I think as long as we see some of the pacing changes in the future parts of the story, and that can become more an element of the game that shines, I think it's going to capture even more people. But again, I think designs are good, combat is good, the open world exploration is good. I didn't even talk about the puzzles. The puzzles in the open world exploration also help break up the exploration to make it feel a little more like you're exploring a world rather than just opening through something empty. I've constantly found myself where I'm working towards one objective and I find myself distracted 3, 4, 5 times, and sometimes forget what my original objective was because there's so many things to do, whether it's echoes to farm and there's enemies around or small world puzzles that are taking place. There's just so much there, and I'm excited to explore it more. I feel like my overall exploration progression is like decent. I've got some areas that are definitely more explored than others, but there's still so much for me to do. I have gone through and beaten every boss, but yeah, there's still so much to explore, guys. So much echo farming to do, and I'm excited to get into that. Now, co-op isn't unlocked until Union level 22, so I've not had an opportunity to try out that. I haven't been having any issues with ping playing on an American server, being in North America. It's been pretty much fine. The only issue I bumped into, and I feel like it's probably a Canadian exclusive issue, is when you're on the American server and if you're playing on the PC client and you try and go into the store, it does everything in a USD value. And so when I tried to use my Canadian credit card, for example, I couldn't. I had to log in on my phone to purchase things on my phone so that I could use them on the PC. Definitely a bug that needs to be fixed. I don't know how they're going to go and do that or what is the best way to do that. But either way, there needs to be some kind of region checking or something that takes place so that Canadians don't get kind of shafted on the PC client. But like, again, that's more of like an inconvenience. I was still able to buy it on my phone. You know, it was still good. So overall, where I'm going to kind of leave the game in terms of my first impressions over the course of the first 24 hours, I want to call it like an 8. To be honest, I have been so sucked into this combat, so sucked into exploring this world and playing these characters and learning the combat and learning the boss patterns that I have just been so incredibly engaged. But definitely the story is something less than to be desired, needs to have some pacing fixes for sure. And some delivery on those voice lines needs a little bit of work beyond just what I mentioned with Chisha. There's other parts too that don't always land, especially on the English VA side. So some of that stuff definitely still needs work, but overall, I'm very happy with it. Let me know what you think of Wuthering Waves in the comments down below. What has your experience been like so far? And I'd love to hear that. Who did you get on your novice banner for Wuthering Waves? I'd be excited to hear that down below. Thank you so much for watching. Shout out to the patrons and the new subscribers on the Twitch channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.